Greetings from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm Mike Small, Executive Director of the Alumni Relations Office at NJIT, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Honors College Virtual Colloquium Series. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dean Lewis Hamilton, Dean of the Honors College, to tell you a little bit more about today's activities. Dean Hamilton, good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you to the Alumni Association for organizing this Honors Colloquium for us today. And I'd like to thank particularly our members of our Board of Visitors who are with us this afternoon and members of our alumni who are with us this afternoon for this passing the torch in this, which is our 25th anniversary year. So it is definitely a 25th anniversary for the history books. And we're going to continue to celebrate it. We're going to stretch it out into 2021 because this has been so much fun so far. But this colloquium is going to be a great one, and it's a very timely one on this issue of advancing your career during kind of these challenging times. And so for those of us who've been at this for a while, we've seen a few of these and have some sense of the next steps. And so I'm so grateful for our alumni and Board of Visitors to offer their wisdom to all of you today. I want to welcome, of course, the honors scholars who are joining us via YouTube, and ask you to remember to type in your name so that we know can verify you're here for this honors colloquium. And I hope this finds all of you doing very well. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. So please be in touch with any questions or concerns or just good news that you have here as you're taking these next steps. So that's without further ado, I want to turn it over to the panel who's waiting here to present to you today.
Dean Hamilton, thanks so much. Okay, so I want to welcome Mohammed Alnakash. Mohammed is the class of 2002 with a Bachelor in Architecture, graduate of the Honors College, and Erica Feldman BS, class of 2010 from the Honors College, and MS 2010 as well. Thanks both for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Okay. So first question, and I want to toss this to you, Mohammed. We take a look at the world around us right now and how much the coronavirus has impacted our situation. Clearly, this is a challenging time from an employment perspective, from a student perspective, pretty much in the world around us. But looking back historically, this is not the first time that we've dealt with similar things. So I wanted to ask you, you graduated around a challenging time yourself. What was your experience like seeking for a job, and how did you keep yourself motivated?
It was, again, the first time you pass an event like this. As you said, there are many events like that. The first time when we were going through the 2008 situation, it was very scary. I was very anxious, especially seeing many knowledgeable and very experienced people around me were being laid off. And that really highlighted the difference between being an employee and an asset to any team. So my advice, as far as like once you find your foot through the door, is to really track what you're doing and make sure you're an asset rather than just a team member. It's really hard to get a sense until you're in that situation. But for people who are looking for internships at this time, it is, again, the life and business is gonna go on. It's just gonna be a different normal. There's more emphasis on like LinkedIn or other online professional settings. So just really get used to it and I say it, and sometimes it comes off in a bad way when I say be shameless. Reach out to anybody there, read their articles, make comments, interact. And that's the way you can It's not what your resume says, but what you do in these interactions to build your network.
Okay, and I'm also going to welcome Dr. Vatsal Shah. Vatsal is the class of 2008 from the Honors College, an MS in 2009, and PhD in 2015. Vatsal, you also graduated in a challenging time in the job market. And it seems almost like every 10 years there's these ups and downs. What was your experience like when you were looking for new employment? Was this a challenge for you, or was it something where it really didn't impact you too much in your job search?
Yeah, well, you mentioned class of 2008 was the worst time to graduate with the financial market. So I came out right at the beginning of the downturn, and I'll say I was lucky to get a full-time job at that point. But I know a lot of my classmates weren't as lucky as I was. And I think the most important thing to do around that time was to really focus on things that we could control versus focusing on things that we couldn't control. And what I mean by focusing on things that we can control, it's looking a little bit more inward on, I know the market is really tight right now, but as an honors student or as a recent grad, where do I have my best probability of getting hired, or where do I find my best probability of connecting with people? It's a little different with the COVID scenario right now because you can't go out and connect with people, but you can still focus on looking online for, looking at job opportunities, spending a lot more time to actually research about the job, what they do, what the company does. What we have now, what we had in 2008 also, is we have a lot more time on our hands, so we can focus on things that are important in our search. So if you have a little more time in your hands, spend some more time on LinkedIn to learn more about the company you're looking to hire. Spend some more time looking at the person you may be interviewing with. Really spend some time to get to know the person, the firm, the opportunity you could be getting into. And the person on the other side will actually find that and see that's pretty fruitful. They'll see that you actually did your homework more so than the person who just kind of came to the interview and said, hey, I need a job right now because it's really bad. Spend some time to be intentional and plan, because you have some time to finally plan for once.
So it sounds like a lot of what you've talked about, Vatsal, is almost like the advanced planning in some ways. How do you come prepared when you're actually going to talk to someone? So you're not necessarily asking for a job, but that clearly requires a little bit of thought about what you're interested in, where you want to go, how you want to speak with people. Erica, I want to toss this to you. Given that idea of advanced work, is this something that you did when you were an NJIT student about to graduate? And if so, what are the sort of things that you did to prepare when you were looking for a new position?
Yeah, so I think planning for a job starts when you first start college, and even before then. So what you really want to do is you want to look for work experience everywhere you can. So if it's a free internship or paid internship, or just creating a website for a local company, whatever you can do, absolutely start doing it immediately. Because I've seen a lot of people who go to graduate and they're like, oh, well, I got a degree, that should be good enough. It's not enough. So one thing that I did, I went to CDS pretty much every year and I looked for internships, whatever they had, and I applied to as many of them as I could. So even if I didn't think I was qualified, or I didn't exactly have all of the skills that I needed, I still applied. Every year I got a different internship. I tested out what I liked and what I didn't like. And that was really important because I really thought that I was going to like programming more than I actually did. And I ended up in more of a security space, which was great for me. But I learned that my sophomore year of college, so that was great. Another thing to prep is to learn everything you can and not just for your degree. So I've run into people who knew both bio and like computer design, and they were uniquely qualified to get a job in modeling the human body. So that person had a step up over everybody else because they knew something that not a whole lot of other people did. So if it's something you're interested in, it might not be directly related to what you think you're going to do. Learn it as much as you can. Especially now, there are so many free programs out there and free training. If you're interested in it, just check it out. See if you like it. You can put it on your resume and it'll maybe help you out later. Maybe it won't, but you'll have learned something cool.
Mohammed, on that note, I wonder if you echo that. How did you test things out, or were you always set on your career path?
Oh no, I actually took a major jump where I felt like I'm not really, after getting like all my internship, passing all the exams, getting like 4 state licenses, I actually decided to jump completely and work with a startup that was doing something similar to Snapchat. And it was a completely eye opener as far as what skills that I had could be transformed in other industries, and not just within the architectural and construction industry. And it really highlighted to me back again on what things I'm really good at, what things I enjoy, and I was able to focus myself. And funny enough, after really working with that startup for 2.5 years, I jumped back into the architectural world where I started with my partner, the company that we run right now, and it is a national company, but we built it in a way that I was mentioning to Erica earlier that 2.5 years ago, we decided that we're going all remote because the technology was there and there was no reason to have an overhead for an office when we can interact from wherever we are and really use those funds of like an overhead back into the company, back into the employees. And it has been an eye opener, especially going through the situation that we're in right now. So I completely agree with Erica. Do not just stick with the single linear line that you started with, because you will miss out on true gifts that you might have had by just sticking with a major that some people really picked it out arbitrarily at the beginning. So you completely will miss your calling, as they say. And I mean, at this time with all the anxiety, I actually feel it's like especially the younger generation has to see this as a true opportunity to forge a future that the older generation will not be able to adapt as quick as they are. So this is a real opportunity that they can develop an edge that will be a lot more competitive than if it was still 6 months ago. So to me, it's just try as many different internships, as many paths out there. You're still very young. You can readjust your path, but right now is the true discovery period of what your edge is.
One more thing, I know everyone is working and learning from home, but the people that I met in college and connected with in college, I still work with all the time. I've seen job positions go through people that I know that I've kept in touch with. So even though you're home and you're probably doing a group project like remotely, keep in touch with those people, actually talk to those people, make some friends. It'll come in handy later.
So quick reminder to our students who are watching right now, if you haven't already, please make sure to type in your name, and please do feel free to ask questions throughout our broadcast. If you have someone in particular to whom you'd like to direct a question, please type in the name of that person. If they're on the screen, that's great. If not, we'll save it for a Q&A later. But please do feel free to type in your names if you haven't already and any questions. Just to sort of summarize here a little bit, Vatsal, not only did you graduate in one of the most challenging times in recent history, I think certainly in recent memory, but you also stayed connected, right? So you were chair of our young alumni group, you recruited other volunteers, you're constantly in touch, and you've come back as an adjunct faculty member. So I wonder if there's, from that perspective, was there anything that was sort of a received wisdom that you heard when you were a student, oh, this is always going to be this way, that turned out not to be the case and you really had to shift? I wonder if you can kind of look ahead. Do you think that there's anything right now that's been received wisdom that maybe these new graduates are going to
Yeah.
throw to the wayside?
Well, let me lean in, Mike. I'll tell you a secret here. So I kind of missed the intention of your question before, but this dovetails what I'm about to tell you right now. One of the hardest times in this situation for a lot of these students is the ability to plan for the future, not knowing what's going to happen right now. And I think some of the wisdom is actually the motto of the Young Alumni Association when I was there about 8 years ago. And the comment was, and our slogan was, "It's who you know," right? And that used to be the Young Alumni Association for NJIT for many, many years. And what you can do right now and what helped along the way was being involved at NJIT Alumni Association, being an adjunct, being with the American Society of Civil Engineers, being a full-time working person in consulting at Mott MacDonald. The best thing that did for me was it opened up countless doors that if a situation like this came up, I had opportunities in different avenues to go down that path. In 2008, when things started going poorly, I would always tell some of my friends who couldn't make it in, I said, why don't you go to this meeting for the American Society of Civil Engineers or ASME or the BME meeting? When you go to those meetings, people see you there. You network with people. When you go out there and just blast a resume to somebody online, it falls on deaf ears to the hundreds of people that are applying to that job. But when you go in person and you try to network and you try to, as someone mentioned before, make contact with those people, it's who you know is going to help you get through these resilient, difficult times right now too. So if I can carry any wisdom forward, you may not think it's important, all the students that are here, but keep in contact, keep in touch, try to get more involved during this time with your professional organization, with your community organization. The more connections that you have, the more opportunities that you have, the better you weather these sort of storms. So we need to bring that motto back again, Mike, for Young Alumni Association. It's who you know. We got to plaster that on all of our T-shirts again.
I remember seeing that on a bunch of mugs.
It was a good handshake. Yeah, it was 2 handshakes.
So Vatsal, Mohammed, Erica, thank you so much for joining us here. Please stay on the line. We're going to pull you back a little bit later as we do Q&A with some of the students who are watching. So what I'd like to do now is welcome a couple other guests who are here. I would like to welcome Siddhartha Bala BS, class of 1996, Maria Karim BS, class of 2005, and Dania Shahzad BS, class of 2013. Maria and Dania and Sid, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So there's a couple questions that I want to throw out, and Sid, I'm going to start with you. So let's say you're in the job, right? And you've got this first 2 years that you're in there. What I found is that it's such a wholly different world. College prepares you for a lot, but experience can frequently be the best teacher, particularly with regards to how different one company can be from another. Looking back, what are some of the things that you did when you first got into a job that helped you get yourself centered, gave you a little bit of a forward path?
Hi, Mike, and hi, everybody. So I think that the first thing that you have to think about is who are you and what are the values and career aspirations that you have that are going to make you successful. And what's important is then to see how much of that validation and support am I getting from my work environment. So if I look at the world today versus the world that I graduated into, I think when I graduated, there was an expectation that you join a company and you were there for life. And I think what we've seen over the last 20 years or so is that the world has changed in such a way that the pace of change means that companies don't evolve at the same rate that the world is changing around you. And people are changing at a different rate from the world around them as well as the companies that they're in. So it's almost inevitable that you will find that these rates of change being different, you will find yourself either at odds with the company that you're in terms of how you've grown versus what the company's focused on, as well as how the world is changing. And I think if I look back on my career, those have been some of the key motivators whenever I've needed to make a change from one environment to another. It's typically been something that I learned or a way in which I grew or a new opportunity that I wanted to pursue. Or sometimes it was just external pressure that said, here's something that came along that matched my unique interests and skills. And I would reiterate again, it's really important early in your career to spend a lot of time being very clear about who you are, because you don't want your identity to be tied up with the organization that you're a part of. A lot of people, when they start their careers or even further in their careers, their identity is their business card. And I would strongly urge folks, especially the Honors College, very smart, very creative individuals, to forge your own identity and create a value where you bring value to an organization, and rather than you deriving value from your organization. So I think if you can build that strong sense of identity early in your career, the way forward will become very clear when the time for transition is right.
So I want to I want to essentially echo this question over to Maria. Maria, you had the opportunity to work for some of the largest companies in the world in a variety of locations around the United States. How did you come to that point? Because in all of our conversations, it seems like you've had sort of the sense that you're heading somewhere. And as much as it's working for large corporations, like Sid referenced, it's also about who you are and what your goals are.
Correct. I definitely agree with kind of like the previous topic. It's not your it's your network, not your net worth. Your network is your net worth. So those relationships. So my career started obviously very early. I started working with IBM, and that was because of the partnerships and the organizations I was in, like SHEP. I was a member. I was part of the executive team. I went to the conference. I got an internship in IBM. That was like my door, my open, my first door that opened for me. And that was actually right after like finishing my freshman year. I had a 4.0. I was part of the the Honor Society. And from there, it just trajectored, forward. Now being from the East Coast to the West Coast, the East Coast does have that mentality. I feel that, once you get that job, you're there forever. And the West Coast are seen very differently. Like if you're not moving, something's wrong. Like you're not growing. And usually people typically hear 2 to 3, even 5 years, there's already headhunters, recruiters on LinkedIn reaching out to me. And the longest I was at a company was with BT, and I was there for 10 years, where I kind of was a big part of my career there, where I went from an IC individual contributor to a manager, where I manage about 15 project program managers globally. And I remember being here in the West Coast, where they started like saying, what's wrong? Like, why are you there for such a long time? And then Intel actually came, they sent me a request through LinkedIn saying, hey, do you want to, interview? And actually the past two, even being out here at Google and with YouTube, they reached out through LinkedIn. They were like, oh, and right now I'm getting Amazon, Apple reaching out, like, do we have some open positions? And that's very common here, because they know they have, equity that they give you within the 3 years, 3 to 4 years, you could move around, depending on the package they give you. So you're very marketable. And I feel if you are true to yourself, true to your brand, see yourself as a brand, your name, you are a brand. Or now there's like, the social media, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, and you have to really, how you present yourself personally and professionally says a lot about you. So what you're posting, what you're talking about, what you're liking, that it's all public. People look at that. Our headhunters or recruiters are looking at that. So you have to be true to yourself, be true to your network, and authenticity is very important for creativity. And if you love what you do, if you have a passion, you're not working a single day in your life. And that's how kind of my career has been. I love what I do. I could be doing it hours. Sometimes I work late, and it's because I love what I do, and that has just propelled my career.
Well, I love that concept of, it's not your net worth, it's your network. Dania, you work at Prudential, again, one of the largest insurance companies in the world, one of the largest financial companies in the world, but you're also an integral piece of that whole Prudential alumni network. And I've personally had the benefit of being able to work with you and benefit from the connection that you've made with alumni there and with the school. Was that something that you knew when you started working at Prudential, that you would have this network, or did you plug into it? Did you actively seek it out?
So it kind of goes back to my college experience. I think that it started there. So when I was in school, I was involved in different on-campus activities and just made connections. And so it was just something that I knew would always help me, because with those connections, I was able to get internships and then my current position at Prudential. So when I started working, it was just something that I just knew was going to help me. But I had the, Prudential has a pretty large alumni base from NJIT. So we have over 250 alums from NJIT. And so that naturally just gives you a great network to start with. So I have senior leaders in my organization that came from NJIT. You build that connection and you continue to grow on that. So I think it just really helped me just coming from NJIT, being at Prudential and using that. And then it made me realize that it's not just, it's other connections you can use as well. So slowly you just realize like your network is what's going to help you move around in the company. So, you schedule coffee or lunch with somebody that you're interested in their group, you get in front of them, and when they have an opportunity to open up, they'll think about you.
So Dania, I'm going to stay with you just because I love throwing out loaded questions here and there. Everybody has that first moment where they think to themselves, why did I do this? And it usually happens pretty early on within the first couple months of working at a place. What's something that stands out to you that you wish you could turn back the clock on and say, I should have done something differently, or maybe not at all?
This is a difficult one. I feel like, I'm sure there was a lot of things that I did, but nothing career ending or something that just, pops up at me right now. Definitely one thing that I'll, just throw out there to be mindful of is, I'm sure a lot of companies use different chat tools. So just be careful with who you're actually chatting with. So I think that just something that came to me once where I meant to chat a friend and I probably chatted my boss and, had to kind of cover that up quickly. But so now I think there's different ways you can just kind of mute things. So I'm very, very careful. It happened very early on. So I'm very careful about who I'm sending my messages to. But in general, you should be mindful of what you're sending anyway, no matter who it is to.
Yeah, I think the inventor of the reply all feature probably should have been thrown in jail at some point in history. Sid, what about you? If you look back on that first year, what's something that you look at it and you say, I could have done that differently or maybe not done it at all?
Well, I kind of lucked out, I think, because I really, really enjoyed my first job. I think that if there was one thing that I could have done differently, I think when you first come out of college, you're so used to this environment and where what you know is rewarded. And so when you go to a work environment, you expect that you're going to succeed based on what you know. And actually, it's a lot more about human relationships and working with people and teamwork and getting to know who all the experts are, because you very quickly realize that you don't know everything. And so I think that that early realization of how I could tap the knowledge of others to actually grow and succeed was something that took me a while to learn. For example, in my first job, there were people who understood the internet inside and out. And I could have very well learned a lot about how that the whole thing worked very early on. But I was so focused on what I brought to the table that I wasn't tapping into that huge network of experts until a few months in, when I realized that there was actually a lot more that I could learn from the people around me. And so I think that's a transition period a lot of new hires go through, is how do you go from that period where you've succeeded up to this point in life, but then you have to turn on the humility and start to realize that there's so much you can tap into in terms of resources and expertise and learning.
I appreciate that. Maria, what about you?
I agree 100% regarding leveraging others, and it's not kind of, you being the rock star, you doing something right by yourself. It's really leveraging everyone around you, the community you build, because I feel another reason why I'm very successful in my role is not only, I graduated with a computer engineering degree, but I'm a technical program manager for Google. How did I land to the role? Because you can't go to college and I'm going to be a program manager, I'm going to be a product manager. Those are not, kind of degrees you could get. You're just, depending on your skills, like, communication, how you negotiate those things, and with engineers, right? Kind of put me to be like to be a successful TPM, where I bring teams together cross-functionally across globes and kind of get them sense to go to one mission. So learning how to do that or very early on in your career is very important. And I actually, thankfully, I learned that at NJIT. The only reason I think I was successful and I graduated with honors, and as a matter of fact, I walked down, I was the person who took the flag for the Albert Dorman Honors College on my graduation of 2005. It was a great honor and accomplishment. And the reason I think I was so successful in NJIT is because I leveraged my class, I had teams, we would do our homework together. We would practice exams. It wasn't just Maria at home studying by herself. I had a group of people that I would study with. I'll look at old exams, and just that teamwork got me to where I am today.
I think that's an interesting concept, and it's going to be my last group question with all of you, but open floor. It seems like companies have invested so much more over the last couple of years in terms of that sort of collaboration. I've also seen that reflected back at NJIT, where if you looked a few years ago, you would have seen substantially less collaborative space, more classrooms or sort of study areas per student. Have you found that at your companies, that they are much more focused on how a team works and operates towards a collective goal?
Yeah, 100. I mean, Google is set up that way. We're 100%. Everything is everything's open for place. You're not expected to be at your desk. Everything is open. We have every floor has micro kitchens and has collaborative room spaces, living rooms. They foster creativity. They have foosball tables, pool tables, basketball. Because matter of fact, a lot of the great discussions happen during a walk. Let's go on a hike. My boss was like, "Oh, let's grab some. Let's stop by and grab from the barista, grab some coffee, and let's walk." Right. And that's where creativity happens. So they foster that 100. I mean, Google, that's what, that's what they foster here.
And Dania, I know Prudential has a lot of focus on that as well, I believe, right?
Yep. So I guess mimicking Google and being inspired by them. So I'm in a newer building. It's probably 4 years old now. And so we have, we get to eat our lunch outside, and then there's a path for us to walk. And there's so many times where we just take our meetings out and we all get some steps in and we collaborate there. And the building itself is pretty new, but we've actually renovated a couple of our floors for fixed income specific organization. And we have way more living rooms, less offices. We're not doing a lot of cubicles anymore. It's a lot of just the great work benches. And it's really the focus. And I think it makes a difference. Just being able to collab, it just makes it so much easier. We grab somebody, go into a little huddle room, and we can work on things. And it's definitely been focused for Prudential. You see a pretty traditional company sort of going that route too now.
Okay. And Sid, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things that I've seen in modern workplaces is that the most successful teams are the most diverse. And so how do you build a forum where you can bring in all of those diverse perspectives? And I think the answer is to encourage more collaboration. And in fact, what we've seen over the last few years, maybe even up to the start of maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where it started, is that this kind of behavior is also being incentivized and rewarded, right? So you tend to do better in a company when you have a more collaborative behavior. And I think the other thing I would add on to that is it's not just collaboration inside an office workspace. What we've really seen the power of, especially in the current climate, is the ability to collaborate and be successful in a virtual environment. And technology and advances in social collaboration have made all of that possible. So I think what you're seeing now is that you will start to see teams and individuals and companies perform better if they've already got that collaborative nature in their DNA.
Okay. All right. Dania, Maria, Sid, thanks very much for joining me. Please stick around for a few minutes. We're going to do Q&A at the end of this. And again, as a quick reminder for all of the students who are watching right now, if you haven't already, please make sure to put your name in the comments field on whatever channel you happen to be watching this so we can track attendance. And I also encourage any questions throughout. So if you have a question directed towards a particular panelist, please say the name of the panelist and then ask your question. If you don't do it right now, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session and we'll refer to it then. Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, so now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome some of our prominent members of the boards of visitors for the Honors College, as well as distinguished members of the NJIT community, Mr. Stuart Abrams, Michael Hanrahan, Bachelor of Architecture, 96, graduate of the Honors Program, MS 96, and of course, J. Robert Hillier, honorary class of 2018, and also the namesake of the Hillier College of Architecture and Design. So Michael, thanks for joining us. Stu, thanks for joining us. And Mr. Hillier, thanks for joining us as well. All right. So there's a lot of collective experience among the three of you. I've got a couple questions to ask about this, and you'll notice this trend through the questions that we've been asking in this panel, where we start out with, you're a student, you're about to graduate, you've got this incredibly challenging or extremely changeable market in front of you. Then our next set of questions was, you're there, you've got your foot in the door, what are you doing? But all three of you gentlemen have had the experience of rising to that senior level position in your companies. You've got a lot of varied experience. So my first question would be, is there something you wish someone had told you when you started that might have helped you early on in your career to get where you are, maybe faster or a little bit easier? And if you don't mind, what I'd like to ask you to do is, again, just kind of reintroduce yourself when you answer and say your title in the company, which I'll go back through at the end and do with the rest of our panelists as well. I'm going to throw that first question to you, Michael. Looking back on it, is there something that you could tell a young Michael, hey, this would have helped you, this is going to get you where you want to go?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. And hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well in these challenging times. I'm Michael Hanrahan. I'm a principal with Clark Caton Hentz Architects. We're a 40-person architecture firm located in Trenton, New Jersey. To your question about what would I tell a young Michael or a student just graduating, things that, would tell myself to listen better, first of all. That there was a lot of information that was given me that I might have been too arrogant, too pig-headed, too 21 years old to listen. But the things that I look back on, there's sort of three things. A couple of them we've touched on already. The first is, this idea of curating your network of people. Networking is so important, and I'm reminded every day how small this world really is. People that I worked with in one capacity at a firm, a consultant, a contractor, what have you, everything comes full circle. I see them again and again, different companies, different jobs, different projects. So the importance of having a strong network is can't be understated enough. I know a number of people have touched on that today. Second, I would say be humble. A few people spoke about it earlier. I hate the question in interviews when people ask me what their job description will be. I'm much more of, we're all team players. If I have to change the toner on the copier, I change the toner on the copier. If I have to, whatever needs to be done, that's what we do to get the project done. And then just, somebody touched on it earlier as well, this idea of lifelong learning. But if you still have the opportunity while you're in school, take business classes that are not necessarily in your major. I graduated with a degree in architecture, so you learn how to architect, hopefully. But it doesn't teach you how to market yourself for the project, how to take care of the books, how to, these kind of business classes that can kind of cultivate the entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, so that, you can in fact succeed at your chosen profession.
Okay. Stuart, what about you?
Sure. Again, I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. I'm a vice president and principal at Langen Engineering, where I direct our environmental cleanup program. So that's kind of my background. I'm on the board of the Honors College, but secret be told, I am not an NJIT grad, so I apologize for that.
We'll let it pass.
Yeah, so the question on the table is, what would I have done differently? But I also hear, certainly in Michael's answer, what did he also do right? So I think I want to address both questions, and I think I want to reflect on what I did right first. And I think there's nothing that I've heard that I disagree with, but one of the things that I think propelled me was lifelong learning. Actually, the technical content of my job now is almost nothing that I learned in school. In fact, the technologies I deal with every day didn't even exist when I graduated from school. And the ability to believe that that NJIT, your education, has taught you the ability to learn, you have to have that self-confidence to teach yourself anything. And one of the things I think that drove my career is this concept of what do I need to learn next? So that there were many times in my career where the question was asked, who knows how to do X? And I was already had spent time figuring it out, so that when it came time for somebody in the office to do X, I'd already figured it out ahead of time. So I think that lifelong learning is really something that's really important. And I actually think when I interview young people, a lot of times I'm partly testing them for their ability to learn. So sometimes what we do is we plant questions with students in maybe the screening phone interview, and then we ask the same technical question again when they show up for the interview. If they don't answer the question, then that's really a tough one. So it's almost like networking is good, know the company you're going to see is good, but also have an idea of what is important to that employer that you know, and don't assume that you were taught that in school, that what's important to them. So, know what you're excellent at, but be humble about it. Okay, that's really important. What I would have done differently, not that my career didn't turn out well, but I think taking risks is really important. I think there were a couple of periods in my career where things were going well. Job was secure. I liked my boss. Pay was equitable. But maybe I could have propelled myself even further if I had taken a risk. So just because things are going well in your career or at some point, taking a risk is something that will always turn out right. Why? Because even if the risk doesn't pay off, what you learn from your mistakes is more than you learn from when you do things right. So that's probably the thing I would have done over again, is to take even more risks than I took. So I don't know if that's helpful. If you have any other questions or thoughts, but that's kind of my perspective. Not that I disagree with anything anybody else said.
Well, and it's interesting because I've learned myself, and I know many people find that lesson a little too late, where learning from your mistakes is both one of the most beneficial things you could do, but also one of the hardest things you can do.
Right.
So this question I'll throw out to Mr. Hillier. I can't think of a better definition of success than getting your name on one of NJIT's colleges. So the fact that we have, it used to be COAD, now it's HCAD, the Hillier College of Architecture and Design. Clearly you've done so many things right. But as we're talking about those challenges, those things that, you turn back the wheels of time and you say, man, I wish I had learned from my mistakes in a different way, or maybe I thought about it in a different way, or I took risks. What's something that really stands out to you that you would share with the students who are watching right now to say, this is something you should know that's going to really help catapult you, or take advantage of what you've learned at NJIT, for instance, that you may not be thinking of right now? And if Mr. Hillier's not there for the moment, that's fine. We'll come back to that question in just a minute. so with that concept in mind, the world is a very different place, and we're talking about all sorts of different ways, right? This lifetime of learning that goes on. One of the questions that I posed to one of our first panelists, Vatsal Shah, was what's something that is a radical change that you thought was always going to be the case, when you started in your career, and just pretty much immediately changed or has changed drastically now in a way that you never would have thought. And I'm thinking here where we're talking to students right now who are going to graduate into a world that I would not have recognized myself 10 years ago. And I imagine 30 years ago it would have been like the Jetsons. You're looking at everything changing so much. So as much as you can't predict the actual change, how do you respond to that change? So what's something that you saw when you first got involved professionally that was a big change to you from what you expected when you actually got into the workforce? And I'll throw that question to Michael again.
I think, touching on the points from earlier, this idea of being a lifelong learner, I think part of that relates to technology and embracing new technologies, new software. I'm going to be the old guy in the room. I graduated college. People were hand drafting in architecture. And from there it went to AutoCAD or things of the like that really were just sort of a computer replacement of the drafting experience. So still very two-dimensional in thinking and the way you put together a drawing set. And then technology has evolved dramatically over the past several years, where everything now is three-dimensional, and you're building these amazing models, if you will, virtually, so you can see your buildings in real time. So the way the profession shifted because of technology wasn't anything I could have really foreseen 25, 26 years ago.
Okay. Stuart, what about you?
Yeah, I have to echo some of the technological change. I too, my first day of work out of college was working at a drafting board. So all those skills is lifelong learning. So yeah, I think that's really important. I think the difference between what I thought the world of work was like when I was in school and what the difference between being a staff scientist or engineer and being a manager was the degree of autonomy. I think being a grown-up, knowing how to behave with humility and ethics, I found as you move up, that becomes more important. How to be a really good manager and a really good leader is not, you can take some courses on it and things like that, but that's a skill you have to develop, and you're to some extent on your own to do it. So I think that's a really good thing that I had not fully appreciated, how much I was on my own to figure that out.
And Mr. Hillier, I'm going to give you the last word on this. If your mic's working. So talking about leadership, leadership is something that clearly starts to arise the second you arrive at school, or even before you go to college, and then it sort of builds. Some of it is a character thing, some of it's an experience thing, but all of the folks who have been on here today, I think, are fantastic examples of leadership. Mr. Hillier, what's something that you would say? And I think, unfortunately, he may have popped off here, so I'm going to save that question for the next Q&A. So for all the students who are watching right now, I'm going to run back through the names of the alumni and guests who participated here today. And it's at this point where we're going to open up the floor. We're going to ask for you to submit questions in the comments. So our first three guests were Mohammed Alnakash, Erica Feldman, and Vatsal Shah. Mohammed is the founder and director of operations at Check Set Review. Erica Feldman was the VP of Cybersecurity Content Management at Citibank. And Vatsal Shah is vice president at Mott MacDonald. Our second guests were Sid Bala, architecture and design focus at BNY Mellon, Maria Karim, who's the YouTube data engineering and program manager at Google, and Dania Shahzad, who's a program manager at PGIM Fixed Income, a subdivision of Prudential. And of course, my guests here were Stuart Abrams, who's Principal and Vice President, Director of Remediation Technology at Langen Engineering, Mr. Michael Hanrahan, who's a partner at Clark Caden Hintz, and J. Robert Hillier, who's a Principal at Studio Hillier. So for all the students who are watching right now, what I will ask you to do is to submit some questions online, and please enter the name of the person to whom you would like to direct that. Now, I'm just going to take a moment and add Mr. Hillier back here. Robert, can you hear me? That's okay. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to come back to Mr. Hillier after the session concludes, forward some questions off there. But I do see that we have more than 100 students who are viewing the video right now. So please submit some questions in our YouTube comments, and I'll be happy to pass along to any one of the panelists. And if I don't see any, I have about 1 million questions. So I love to throw that out to everybody. So I'll tell you what, let me start with one of my absolute favorite alums. You're all my favorite alums, but I don't think this will come as a surprise to him. Vatsal Shah. So Vatsal, welcome back to the screen here. Vatsal, something that I've always loved that you've done, you come back and on a regular basis, you're talking to students. In fact, you even did a webinar before webinars were really webinars, right? Which was about personal brand and how that helps. I've also seen you as a mentor at Mott, which I think has been something really enormously helpful to so many around you. When you started working at Mott, and really in the beginning of your professional career, did you seek out a mentor? Did you know what mentorship was? And what kind of inspired you to mentor others?
Yeah, I think everyone should have a mentor, and I think sometimes it's almost a misconception that a mentor has someone that's older than you or someone who's more senior than you, has more experience than you. It can be anyone that can give you some guidance. A mentor is meant to really help you just think of different things and think through processes differently. When I started my work full-time at Mott after graduating from the Honors College in 2008, it was really important to find a mentor because you have this wide open area you can kind of take your career towards. I just wanted to know what other people have done before. Having a mentor or a series of mentors is almost like living 4 or 5 lives in your own life. I mean, having a mentor takes the wisdom of everyone else's different wisdoms along the way, and rather than you learning the process, you can kind of learn from others. So I call mentorship the experience that you can kind of learn and earn along the way. Learning is going the hard way. You actually going through the trials and tribulations, and earning is actually getting it from somebody else and taking their life experiences and taking them into your own side. So I think it's absolutely important and paramount to have a mentor.
That's great. Yeah, and a little plug for the Alumni Association of NJIT, in particular the Young Alumni Association, to which Vatsal was really an integral leader, especially in its early and mid days. Mentorship and networking is a huge part of what the Alumni Association can offer. And also the Honors College, the Board of Visitors, the alumni who volunteer there, the dedication that you have as students translates to alumni. So you have a very strong network there to support you, and I encourage you to connect with people like Vatsal and the folks here to establish a strong relationship there.
Can I add one thing, Mike, for everyone on the call, the students that are here that are watching? You have in front of you 12 titans of different industries. Mentorship isn't just seeking out someone who can support you, but mentorship is also asking questions of people around you. Use these resources. I can see a few people asking questions, but now is a great time to be a little bold, to ask a good question of someone, and then to follow up afterward and see if you can continue that conversation. It'll really go a long way.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is from Elizabeth Kowalczyk for Mohammed Alnakash and Michael Hanrahan. I'm going to add them to the stream now. So for Mohammed and for Michael, if an internship for the summer was canceled, which unfortunately is happening occasionally now, how would you recommend that an architecture student continues to develop their design skills and not fall behind on portfolio and resume?
Who do you want to answer that, Michael?
I think either one. Mohammed, if you're on there. If not, Michael, please feel free.
Well, I'll start by saying call me. We've struggled this summer to attract talented folks for a summer position. So people can feel free to reach out to me after this meeting if they'd like to. an interesting question. You know, I'm a big one for, somebody mentioned it earlier, and I have to say I slightly disagreed with it about, you know, offering your services for free to folks and trying to get your foot in the door that way. I'm a big believer in your time in, you know, is worth something, and you should be paid for what you do. You know, I'm not a big believer in unpaid internships, but you know, I think right now the important thing, it's less important the design skills. I mean, you're going to graduate college and no one's going to throw you the keys right away and say, here's a gazillion-dollar building and go design this. Right now, it's more important about cultivating your network, as we've been talking about. You know, I'm trying to think of the way it was said to me. Nobody cares what you know until they know you care. You know, so the more you can ingratiate yourself to somebody, the more you can take an interest in them, the more you can build your network, the more likely they will be to remember you when they have a position available.
Mohammed,
I would
what about
agree
you?
with Michael. Number one, never, no matter how hard it gets, do not work for free, because anybody that you work for free for, they truly are not seeing the value, or they're just simply using you. So I completely agree with that, as harsh as it might be. Second, again, you can reach out to me. There are a lot of firms out here that would be happy to offer internships, paid internships, remotely too. So reach out. And number three, I would encourage, as mentioned on earlier, connect with any of the panelists on LinkedIn or any other social media and ask questions. Follow up with the calls, and if they don't know the answer or they don't have an immediate lead, they might know somebody that they can defer you to. So just because the stock market is crashing doesn't mean your future is. So just stay calm, connect with people, talk and network, and you would be surprised how successful you can come out of it.
I would also add 2 points to that quickly. One, somebody mentioned it earlier, but you know, a great resource is your professional organization. So if it's an architecture student, you know, reaching out either through AIAS at NJIT or to AIA New Jersey or whatever your local chapter may be, they may be aware of opportunities for you. One of the hats I wear, I've been president of AIA New Jersey. I'm currently the regional rep to the National Council. So again, you know, I can connect you with people if possible. And I also think that right now, if I was graduating, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I mean, I think that as a young person, whether you're in college or you're graduating, the virus and the way people are thinking about their staff, I think it's going to be older people who have not necessarily continued with, you know, lifelong learning or keeping up, that, you know, are going to be more the casualties of this recession or whatever you want to call it. So I think that, you know, emerging professionals who, you know, are typically at a, you know, a more favorable price point, you're seen as being flexible, you're seen as being current with technologies, that you are, compared to others, at an advantage right now.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. So our next question comes from Daniel Galata, and I'm going to ask Erica, Sid, and Dania to answer it. The question is, how do you think that the cancellation and the major transition to online interaction is going to affect internships, particularly with regards to that job market afterwards? So much of what we've talked about here has been the preparation for jobs. Now internships can help that. and really contribute. But this is such a different world. And I have to agree with some of the sentiment, I think, behind Daniel's question. I doubt that we're going to suddenly turn back the clock in the next couple months, in the next year, or possibly in the near term at all. I think the world is changing just a little bit. So how do you see this switch to online starting to affect the job prospects for the students who are watching us right now? And I'll throw that first one to you, Sid.
So I think you will see a temporary impact in terms of internships, especially for summer internships, and that's just a reaction of companies that are trying to manage their risk. Because if you think about it, a lot of companies have employees, and I can tell you that many companies are trying to protect the workers who are working there currently, right? So it's and also you wouldn't want to take on the risk of bringing somebody in and then not being able to hire them. So I think there's a little bit of risk management going on there. But if I was a student in this situation, I would look to all the different ways in which I can continue to showcase my work. And I think we're lucky to live in a world that allows you to do that, right? So I think regardless of major, there are communities that you can belong to, online resource groups where you can start and share your work, whether it's a portfolio as an architect or a piece of code as a technical person or others. So I think the really important thing is just like a fish that'll die if it stops swimming, right? Don't stop swimming. Just keep working, and even if you're not at a company, just keep producing work and output and find a way to showcase that, because when the time comes for you to be back in a room with an interviewer, you'll have a lot more work to show for it. So I think try to get in the mindset that I don't need an organization or a company as an environment for me to do my work. Just keep working.
Dania, how do you keep swimming?
So at least I actually just got off the call earlier. So Prudential has not canceled their summer internship program, and they're continuing with it, but it will be fully virtual. And one thing that I think is great is that they're actually pairing everybody up. So it'll be an enterprise-wide mentorship program. So I think that's the opportunity. So if your internships aren't canceled and you are paired with somebody, and even if you aren't, look to pair with somebody, ask somebody to be your mentor, and keep that relationship after your internship's over. So we're just shortening the timeline of our internship a little bit, but it will be fully virtual. I'm lucky to say that I'm able to do my job fully, working from home, and so are most people. Although investment performance might be down right now, operational volumes are really high, so we actually need the help. So I think interns will be quite busy if they're working at Prudential.
Erica, what about you?
Yeah, I second that. For large companies like ours, financial companies, we've got interns. They're doing well. We're definitely looking for more. For in the computing space, a lot of us were set up to work online already. So transitioning to working from home was not a big deal. And I think once this is all over, a lot of people will realize that you don't necessarily need to be in the office full time in order to get your work done. And it's a adjustment. So we were talking earlier, like one of the things you have to learn to do when you first work from home is to like get dressed in the morning. It sounds obvious, but you have to get yourself into the mindset that even though you are at home, you are still going to work.
So maybe there's a bit of a long tail here where because we're moving online, it starts to bring forward that whole professional interaction. Like people will learn new skill sets to accommodate that. Like putting pants on instead of pajamas.
And if you have a problem, even though you can't walk to your coworker's desk or go out to lunch with them, you can call them and you can have a lunch meeting. You can have a happy hour or whatever it may be, just to get to know each other and to talk and do all the things that you currently can't do in person. So I think we're moving there. I think a lot of companies are moving there, and they didn't realize what was possible until they had to. And even after this is all over, some of us still might start being more remote because we can be.
So interesting. Our next question, and thank you very much all for answering that. I'm going to throw over to Maria, Stu, and Vatsal. So speaking of personal interactions and some of the ups and downs on that, uh, Matthias Lago asked a question about ego and how that can occasionally get in the way of an unbiased evaluation of what approach or idea is better suited to achieving something. I can't think of a single professional, right, who hasn't at some point said, look, why can't we just do it this way? This way makes more sense. And so much of how you achieve something is knowing when to do that, when not to do that, and whether or not it does make more sense. Ego for whether it's a boss or a coworker, but also your own. If you've come across that in your career, how do you deal with others with whom you might maybe see things differently, or with yourself? And here I'll throw it to Stu first.
Yeah, working in a firm of high achieving partners. This is actually a relatively common occurrence in my work, and the way to do it is two things. One, don't care who gets credit. So it's not about your idea or the other person's idea. It's about what is the good idea, and let logic prevail. So typically, if you think there's another person whose idea is bad, and you have a good idea, break down your idea into its smallest parts and walk the other person through it in an unemotional manner. And if the person likes your idea and they want to take credit for it, God bless them, And so I think, but also have an open mind, because honestly, sometimes the other person's idea has merit and you just didn't see it that way. And you come out with an even better idea. But it's, I think the key thing is not be concerned whose idea it is.
Vatsal, what about you?
Yeah, I'm making some notes because Stuart brings up some good points there. And there's two situations you can be in. When you're younger and you're just starting your career, sometimes leaders above you might have the ability to say yes or no on your idea. What Stuart brings up is a fantastic idea. When you have an idea and you're not the decision maker, it's really important to help someone, walk through and deconstruct your idea so they understand where it's coming from, the pieces of it. In communicating those different pieces, sometimes it clicks and they can say, yeah, that actually makes sense along the way. When you're in a decision-making capacity, and this has happened to me plenty of times, being human, your mind, your emotion might think one thing. Hey, I don't really like that person. I don't like the idea. I don't think it's going to work. And you'll just dismiss it right away. And what I found is really helpful to me is if I think an idea may or may not hold merit, I'll write it down, because the words in black and white sometimes won't lie. I'll sleep on it overnight and I'll look at it the next day and say, hey, in black and white paper, no emotion, no one's name connected to it. Does this make sense? And there's been plenty of times where my heart says, I don't trust that person. I don't trust the idea. It doesn't sound right. I write it down, look at it the next day and say, that actually holds some merit to it. Let's go and deconstruct the idea together and see what we can pull out of it. Because sometimes your heart will win over your mind sometimes. You just got to be careful of that.
I love that. The heart wins over the mind. That happens to me all the time, by the way. My mind keeps saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Marie, you're working at YouTube, Google. This is one of the most highly competitive companies in the world. You've got people, you've got to be constantly sort of saying, look, I got here. So I've already passed every test under the sun. I know what I'm talking about. I don't know that because I haven't been there, but it feels like that to me. How do you manage that? How do you make that constructive? And I imagine Google's put a lot of thought into this too, in terms of how you bring together these different personalities to achieve something together.
Correct. So, we're very data driven. Data doesn't lie. We do models. We take ideas, and then we do a lot of pros and cons and review those ideas. Because when you come into a company like Google, like everyone was a valedictorian, or everyone. It's a different mindset. Like everyone understands that they know what they're doing. It's just more cultivating what are the pros and cons, and everything is data driven. Looking at the data, and then sometimes maybe decision A or B are not the best. Maybe a kind of a hybrid of both A and B, and that's how things evolve and change. And That's how we make decisions, by reviewing it in a community. And also when I have to make decisions, for example, they say, do you want X or Y? And I know the decision's up to me, like what's going to be like published somewhere. I will say, let me do the analysis. Let me see which better way represents the data or the story that we're trying to tell the best way. So it's always data driven. It's not personal, like, do I like that person or ego. If I keep it strictly to numbers and data, it doesn't steer you wrong.
So I love that, because you can point back to something concrete and say, look, this is what it is. Facts are facts. Yeah. Hopefully with a smile on your face. So our next question, and we have time for basically 2 more questions, I think is a pretty interesting one. We've talked so much about networking and all the elements that go along with that, and how you work with people and collaborate, but keeping, and several of you have mentioned this, keeping that sense of authenticity is challenging, right? So when you're interacting with so many different people, it's less about being a people pleaser and more about, how do I hold true to my ideals and my values while making these things work? And I'm going to keep some of you folks on here, and then rotate in a couple of folks to add to this. Maria, what about you? How do you hold true to who you are when you're doing so many different things with so many different people?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I go back to, like, I remember the course I took in ethics. As an engineer, we uphold certain decisions that we make that could be impactful depending on the products that we're putting out in the market. And not in my current, when I was Google, was with another company previously, they wanted to get something out the door, and I'm like, we have to review. We're not just to get it out to, I'm not going to sign on that. If I'm managing this program from an ethical perspective, if something doesn't meet the criteria, then I'm flagging it, because that's my ethics of what I uphold from myself. And I feel like every engineer, every person has to have their own values and uphold their ethics and think about the impact of that, of that product going out to society, and the impact of that.
Okay, and Vatsal, how about you?
All right, well, I'll give you my secret towards networking. I hate the word networking. I think the best way to look at for younger students or anyone to feel authentic, you're not going to network. You're going out to make friends. If you go out there with the mindset of, I'm going out to make a new friend, make an actual heartfelt connection, it means something. You don't want to have someone where you meet them, you've networked with them, and they just become some person in your Rolodex. You want to be able to call someone in the middle of the night and say, hey, I need some help, or I need help with something along the way. A friend as part of your network will go a much longer way than just saying, I'm going out there to network with someone. If you think of it with going out to meet friends instead of, hey, I'm going to go network, I'm going to go meet a friend or make a friend, that'll make it much easier, and it'll make the connection more genuine.
Yeah, I love that. Stu, does that line up with your experience in terms of staying true to yourself and authentic?
Yeah, absolutely. You should be always genuine, honest, and that honesty doesn't have to be strident. I think people get confused about sticking to their principles versus just being honest. Oh, I'm not comfortable with that technical solution. Can you walk me through it? Rather than saying that won't work, and things like that. So, and yeah, I don't disagree.
How about you, Erica?
I feel like if you have a mentor or you're networking, you really have to be honest with yourself. And you also have to think the best of yourself. So maybe, you think you're pretty good at Java, but you're not sure. You should say that you know what you know. And if people start believing in you, then maybe you'll realize that you are someone who knows what they're talking about. And maybe you realize that you're not, but that's what your network is for, to tell you who you are and what they believe in you, how they believe in you, and to encourage you to do better than you might otherwise believe.
It's almost like an honesty sounding board in a way. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And Michael, would you agree with that? Being able to use your, like Vatsal said, the relationships that you've got with people as a way to sort of self-authenticate? Like, you are who you are, partially with the people around you, sort of showcasing that you're being honest to yourself or not?
I thought Vatsal was 1,000% correct. That, you know, I like the analogy of you're making a friend. I don't oppose the word networking, but, you know, I do view it as you're making a friend. And, you know, I'll use just a recent example. Stu's firm, Langen. I don't work with Stu often, but one of his colleagues, gentleman Chris, is a big Lehigh University guy, and I have someone very close to me who's attending Lafayette. You know, which, if you know those two schools, they will kill each other. I was just chatting with Chris yesterday over that rivalry, and there's sort of that you know, good-natured ribbing, bonding that was happening, and you know, really, you know, it was more just two people checking in on each other in you know, strange times. But you know, because you're developing that friendship, that kinship, that you know, my success is his success, and vice versa. I want to work with those people again. You know, so it's not all, you know, what I know and my technical proficiency, but you know, it's who you know, and you know, I don't try to put on any airs, and hopefully people don't with me either. And generally, people can see through that crap anyway.
That sounds about right. So the next question, and I'm actually going to make this the second to last question. I'm going to put out to Erica, Sid, Maria, and Mohammed. I get this a lot in the alumni office. I'm an international student. I'm struggling because there's a lot of firms that don't hire domestic students. Do you have any advice for an international student who's looking to try and build a lot of what you're describing in terms of a career, knowing some of the challenges that are coming about right now? And that's an open question.
I can share some perspective on that, having come to NGIT as an international student myself. And I think the first thing I'll say is it's hard. It's really hard to make that transition from being an international student. And I think in my case, I had to go away for a year and then come back. But a lot of that was driven by the fact that I was bullish on America, right? So I was just making a bet on the country as a whole and saying, I'm going to find a spot where I can create some value. And it's about, can you demonstrate that value in a way that casts you as being unique and being able to add something to the fabric of the country? It's really not about your major or your job, right? So that's an important mindset. But another way that I've come to look at it over the years is that it's also important, as the world is changing, to start to look at where do you want to be, right? For a lot of people, America is a very strong or attractant of talent and quality, and here's where a lot of promising things are happening. But you also have to look globally and look at other opportunities. So I would say two things. One is if you're 100% committed, then look at all the ways in which you can make that happen through relationships and opportunities and cultivating your own skills. But don't let that be the only option. There's a lot of options out there if you start to look globally as well.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I mean, again, I speak from experience with coming as an international student and especially dealing with the landscape around September 11th. It was very, very difficult. And as was mentioned, I think, first of all, you need to look inwards and make a decision whether you want to really invest yourself here or elsewhere. And if you're committed, just really, you have to be relentless. You have to, perseverance is your only option, no matter how gloomy it looks. And but don't do it all by yourself. Reach out, get help, talk to whether it's the International Student Office, And I don't know if that what like the condition of like things right now, but even to friends, and that's why we keep focusing on networking, because it's not about an older generation that has answers, but any perspective to help you ask the right questions. It's not about giving you answers. And it will be very difficult, especially with the political landscape right now. It might be scary, but reach out, talk to especially alumni who have gone through some of these challenges. So once you make the decision, I understand right now it might be even harder for international students to get jobs or even internships, but there is still a lot of opportunities. Just really be bold, be shameless in trying to network, and be authentic, and your value will shine.
What one thing I'll add is in the current situation we're in, everything is virtual, right, globally. So if you are having issues finding something domestically, depending where you are, you could depending where you're coming from, look at even positions in that region. I mean, I know people are getting positions globally because everything right now is virtual. Another thing is as well that could help if you can't get an internship, if your internship is canceled, you could work for a nonprofit volunteering, having that experience and helping a nonprofit. So to me, it's like a double win, because you're helping a nonprofit you either build a website or whatever your talent or your expertise is, and at the same time you're getting experience and you could showcase it and put it on your resume. So I feel from that perspective, there is other things that you could do if you're having difficulties getting an internship or a job. Instead of just being home and taking a course, put yourself out there, because it's just opening again doors and making relationship.
So I'm going to do one last question. I'm probably a little over time. In fact, I'm sure I'm a little over time, but I think it's a good one. And I want to pull up Vatsal, Dania, and Mr. Hillier, if that audio is working there. It's a question from Jeremy Bedient, and Jeremy says, "What's a practical way that you have been able to develop yourself into a better listener?" And when I think of some of the people who have achieved great success by being listeners and making that useful, I automatically think of the folks up on the screen here. So let me start with Mr. Hillier. If the audio is working there, do you have a take on a practical way you've been able to develop into a better listener?
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, finally. I think it's been a very interesting session for an hour and 20 minutes. Really, my compliments to you. Give me the question again quickly.
Sure. So what's a practical way that you've been able to develop yourself into a better listener, so that you're benefiting the people around you and yourself as well?
That's a very good question. The good Lord gave us one mouth and two ears, and there's a reason for that. And I found that as I've gone on in my career, I've become more and more of a listener and less of a talker. And I think that if you listen carefully, and sometimes you have to really focus on it because there's a lot of blah, blah, blah that gets said. And you need to really have a high, I think everybody needs to work on their empathy, because the empathy is what really gives you the real messages that people are having. One of the biggest problems with this whole technology that we're going through right now of talking on the screen is you can't really feel the detail of the body English, the twitches in the eyes, that kind of thing. Dania is very well lit in her scene, and it's an amazing help. On the other hand, I was with a client the other day who had his glasses on, and he was in his living room, and he had huge picture windows across the living room, and I couldn't see his eyes. I was just looking at reflections of his living room windows. And so I think it comes down to empathy, to really listen. And as one of the guests said, in terms of making connections, you have to do it with your heart, and that's another aspect to it. Is listen to your heart as much as you're listening to your head when you hear somebody talking, and that will actually enhance the listening, I think. Another thing that has been talked about is ego. And one thing that I learned a long time ago, I'd like to just talk about for a moment, is ego drive. Ego says, I'm the best goddamn architect you're ever going to meet. Ego drive says, what's your problem? Because I'm going to win you over. Ego drive says, I want to win, but I'm going to win the smart way, which is by listening to you. And so that's kind of my, it's been my guide all along from one of my really great mentors. So
I appreciate that distinction, because obviously not all types of that ego are a bad thing. It helps build confidence, but where you're taking it, what you do with it, is so important. Obviously to professional success too. And you know, Dania, as the as the guy, I've got two windows behind me. So as the lady who did the lighting, right? How do you feel about that concept of listening and that empathy and being able to connect with somebody the way that Mr. Hillier just described?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything he said. I think when you listen with intent and empathy is when you actually are able to absorb what people are saying. So I definitely think, like, early in your career, if you're sitting in meetings, you're networking, you're sitting in, classes and you're learning, that's an opportunity to practice your listening, because you're not asked to maybe volunteer and speak up as much in those times, and sometimes your mind just might drift and you might not be paying attention. But come back from those meetings and summarize, what did you learn? Take like 3 takeaways from it. And I think just practicing earlier on and being engaged is going to just make it then second nature to you.
And Vatsal, would you echo what Dania is saying there?
Yeah, absolutely. You asked for one practical way, I'll give you 2. I always carry with me a notepad, write things down, because listening means comprehending, right? You can hear someone, that's not truly listening to somebody though. So I think listening means actually writing things down and making sense of it. I think being a better listener also means seeking understanding and confirmation. If Dania tells me something, me understanding it and listening means me telling her back, this is how I understand it. Do you also agree? Did I hear you correctly? So we don't lose anything in communication. I think the listening boundary sometimes breaks when she tells me something, I understand it in my own perception with however I see the world, and I miss things that she's asking that are critical for her and important for her. And I think just reaffirming what she's asking for means you're actually listening, you're paying attention, you're being intentional, you're making some sort of connection with them to understand what they're asking.
That's great. Oh, okay, so I want to thank all my guests. I do want to take the opportunity, Mr. Hillier, to give you the final word here. So, you've had a long and very distinguished career. You're still working. You're doing a ton of things. You've been an enormous benefactor for the university. You're talking to the seniors who are viewing us right now, actually the honor students who are viewing us right now. What's something that you want to pass along to them to say, here's what your tomorrow looks like. Here's how to make that tomorrow a better day.
Okay, to give away my age, when I talk about carbon paper, people don't know what I'm talking about. And I was at work before the first Xerox machine was ever invented. And so I've been around for a while. I would tell your students, number one, when you write your resume, make it beautifully graphic, make it graphically beautiful. We get a lot of resumes that are poorly typed, misspellings, the dates aren't always right, and we pass on them. On the other hand, if we get one that's really beautifully presented and simple to read and different than the usual typed version, we look at it more carefully. That's number one point. Number two, concerning networking, I found the best networking organization is PSMA, which stands for Professional Services Management Association. And it is a nationwide organization that is basically aimed only at professional services. And it's a great place to go. I'll go there and meet the marketing people from Langen and other engineers that I won't announce or name today. The third thing that I would suggest, and I'm going to give you a name called GraceWorks, and there's a woman named Carol Dosher who is a trainer in presentation, and it's really important that students going out into the world today know how to make a presentation, how important eye contact is, how important dress is, which is another thing. We have people coming to interviews in sweatshirts, and we're a professional organization, and we really wonder, is this person really sensitive to what it is to be a professional? And so anyway, Carol is a coach who loves working with young people. I teach 2 graduate courses at Princeton, and one of them, incidentally, for Mr. Monahan, the architect from Trenton, is that it's all about how to start your own firm and how to learn the business of it. And my daughter, who just got her master's degree from Penn in architecture, took all of the business courses at Wharton that she could. And so he's absolutely right. Go to a night school or something, but get an MBA along with being an architect. Anyway, those are my kind of pointers. And I think having a mentor, one of the reasons, if I'm successful, one of the reasons is that I had 3 phenomenal mentors in my career, early in my career, who really told me how to do things, how to get things done, and were just the best coaches ever. So go to a job where you can feel that you're going to have a mentor that really likes you and wants to help you along.
That's great. That's great advice. Mr. Hillier, thank you very much. All right, folks, so that is concluding the Honors Colloquia today. I want to particularly thank Mohammed Alnakash, class of 2002, Erica Feldman, class of 2010 and MS 2010, Dr. Vatsal Shah, class of 08, 09, and 15, Sid Bala, class of 1996, Maria Karim, class of 2005, Dania Shahzad, class of 2013, Stuart Abrams, Michael Hanrahan, class of 96 and 90, and also 96, and Mr. Robert Hillier, honorary class of 2018. Our guests did I think, an outstanding job today. What I want to let all the students who are watching here know is that this is your network. These are the people who are there to connect with you. It's who you know. Well, these are folks you know now. So in addition to having put your names in the YouTube channel, and again, if you haven't put your name in, please make sure you do so now to indicate that you've attended this, reach out. We will put you in contact with the folks who participated here today. We're happy to make those connections for you. In fact, I can tell you that is exactly my job. So I'm thrilled to participate. Lastly, you will have noticed in the bottom left-hand side of your screen, there's a logo for the Albert Dorman Honors College that says the 25th anniversary. This is a big year for the Albert Dorman Honors College. So on October 9th, please mark your calendars. The Albert Dorman Honors College is going to be celebrating its 25th anniversary during Homecoming 2020. Now, with all the situations that are going on, what I can tell you is that we are planning for October 9th as a big celebration, and you will receive more information over the next month to 2 months. In the meantime, it has been an absolute pleasure hosting you. My name is Mike Small, and I'm Executive Director of the Alumni Relations Office at NJIT, and this has been the Honors College Colloquium. I look forward to welcoming you to the next one. Thanks so much, and go Highlanders.